These aren't your typical retail meltdowns or parking lot confrontations. These are the stories of women who perish defending their delusions. In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the most stupid incidents of Karens ever, their behavior fatally meeting the unforgiving laws of the world. It was April 3rd, 2016. The morning air in Queens, New York carried the usual urban mix of exhaust and cooking smells, masking the danger that would claim 3 lives before noon. Trisha Volkov, 51, owned 4 duplex units across Queens, inherited from her father's modest real estate portfolio. Over 15 years, she built a reputation among tenants and housing advocates for aggressive tactics, illegal lockouts, utility shutoffs, and intimidation aimed at silencing maintenance complaints. Property management collectives knew her for openly dismissing repair requests as freeloading. Her strategy was straightforward: make conditions intolerable so tenants left on their own, avoiding formal eviction proceedings. Trisha's properties featured aging gas lines, outdated electrical systems, and heating units that should have been replaced decades earlier. Other tenants said that she viewed maintenance requests as personal attacks on her business model. That morning, Trisha was targeting Kimberly Santos, a single mother living in Unit 2B with her 6-year-old son. Kimberly had filed multiple complaints about heating issues and requested repairs that would cost several $1,000s. Rather than address the problems, Trisha decided to shut off gas service to force them out. At 10:30 a.m., surveillance footage from a nearby bodega showed Trisha entering the basement utility area through the side service door, carrying bolt cutters and a small toolbox. The basement was poorly ventilated with stagnant air and no active exhaust, allowing gas to linger. Her online history showed she had researched the building's gas system and believed she could disconnect service to Unit 2B without affecting others. Instead of an apartment-specific line, she tampered with an exposed branch off the main gas riser feeding the rear units, mistaking it for a shutoff. She spent several minutes loosening a corroded union fitting, noticed the gas odor intensifying, then left quickly, assuming it was a minor release that would dissipate without warning anyone or checking for leaks. Gas quickly spread into enclosed spaces above the basement, moving through wall cavities, stairwell chases, and into Unit 2B. Kimberly had left for lunch less than an hour earlier. Ignition sources in her apartment were limited to normal household appliances, including a refrigerator and a gas boiler with automatic relays. Poor ventilation and closed winter windows trapped the gas, allowing it to build to dangerous levels. Several tenants later reported a strong hallway odor, but assumed it was a brief maintenance issue and did not call 911. Around 11:25 a.m., Kimberly returned from lunch and moved quickly through the apartment without stopping to investigate the smell, later determined to have been masked by street food and boulevard exhaust. As she reached the kitchen, one of several possible ignition sources, later believed to include the refrigerator's thermostat cycling, produced a small electrical spark. The ignition occurred in the kitchen, triggering an explosion that sent a rapid pressure wave through adjacent gas-filled rooms, blew out interior walls, compromised load-bearing supports, and led to partial second-floor collapse, hurling debris into nearby storefronts. Trisha had returned minutes earlier to check her progress and was standing near the building's entrance when the blast occurred. The explosion threw her multiple feet into the street, where falling concrete crushed her chest and skull. Kimberly and her son, who had been in the kitchen, sustained unsurvivable injuries. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but all 3 victims had injuries incompatible with survival. The medical examiner determined Trisha died from catastrophic blunt force trauma, internal organ rupture, and severe thermal injuries consistent with a gas explosion. The report concluded death occurred within seconds of the blast for all 3 victims. The investigation revealed years of unauthorized utility modifications across her properties, including tampered valves, mismatched fittings, and evidence of prior unpermitted shutoffs. The remaining tenants formed a housing cooperative and successfully sued Trisha's estate for damages. It was September 18th, 2014. The afternoon sun baked the desert asphalt along Interstate 10 near Mesa, Arizona, casting heat ripples that distorted the lines of traffic, moving steadily at 75 miles per hour. Dust devils stirred along the shoulder, lifting small stones and loose paper into brief spirals. Eleanor Brickman, a 67-year-old retired bookkeeper, sat in her unregistered sedan at a gas station tucked between the frontage road and the interstate. Her hand-painted wooden license plate leaned slightly to the left on the bumper, the rough brushstrokes clearly visible to anyone paying attention. For the past 3 years, Eleanor had immersed herself in sovereign citizen ideology, drawn in by online forums she had discovered after her husband's death. Friends and relatives described her as increasingly distrustful of any government authority, convinced that some laws were merely suggestions imposed on the uninformed. Neighbors recalled her repeatedly confronting postal workers over routine deliveries, filming city employees performing inspections, and openly refusing to comply with parking regulations or permit requirements. Eleanor kept a notebook filled with scribbled arguments about voluntary contracts and constitutional loopholes, which she often referred to aloud when explaining her actions to anyone nearby. That afternoon, Eleanor had clashed with a road maintenance worker assigned to shoulder cleanup. He had insisted she could not park her vehicle with a wooden license plate, prompting a heated exchange in which Eleanor loudly declared all vehicle registration to be voluntary contracts she had never signed. The worker threatened to call the police and recalled Eleanor's face flushed. She retreated to her trunk and carefully retrieved a hand-painted stop sign. She announced aloud that she would stage a constitutional demonstration against traffic enforcement, likely convinced that her actions would assert her legal independence. Eleanor walked along an unfenced frontage access point leading to an interstate overpass, then descended to the shoulder of the busy highway through a maintenance gap in the barrier fencing. Multiple witnesses later estimated she stood on the concrete barrier separating the shoulder from the right lane for approximately 30 to 60 seconds, holding her homemade sign and shouting about constitutional rights. At least one motorist later reported calling 911 to report a pedestrian near the lanes, but traffic continued flowing at highway speeds, drivers unaware of the developing situation. Eleanor's behavior escalated as she stepped closer to the active lanes, apparently believing her protest would force vehicles to acknowledge her authority. Eleanor walked directly into the right travel lane of Interstate 10. A traffic monitoring camera mounted near the overpass captured her stepping into the path of oncoming vehicles, her stop sign raised above her head. A commercial semi-truck traveling at highway speed, later estimated between 70 and 75 miles per hour, had no time to react. The driver later reported seeing Eleanor appear suddenly in his lane, but couldn't stop in time. The impact was instantaneous and devastating. Eleanor's body was thrown forward dozens of feet away, landing in the median strip. The truck driver immediately pulled over and called 911. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, with troopers assuming control of the scene, but Eleanor showed no signs of life. The coroner's report detailed massive blunt force trauma, including complete chest compression, severe head injury, and catastrophic internal bleeding. The injuries were deemed unsurvivable, with death occurring within seconds of impact given the forces involved. Traffic backed up for miles as investigators documented the scene, and traffic cameras provided clear evidence of Eleanor's deliberate actions. The truck driver, a 15-year veteran of long-haul driving, left the profession permanently after the incident. It was November 22, 2017. The dusty roads of Córdoba province in Argentina stretched endlessly under the Argentine sun, their isolation hiding dangers that would claim a life before sunset. Marie Kowalski, 42, had relocated from Minneapolis 6 months earlier, seeking a fresh start after a series of road rage incidents had cost her employment at a regional insurance firm. Her Minnesota driving record showed multiple citations for aggressive driving and a restraining order from a driver she had pursued home on 2 separate occasions. Her relatives recalled she viewed confrontations behind the wheel as tests of principle, rarely considering the risk of escalation. Her move to Argentina had not changed her fundamental approach to driving conflicts. Local residents and neighbors noted several tense encounters she'd had in the preceding months, with minor horn-honking disputes and gestures that never escalated into physical violence but drew wary stares. Language barriers had prevented full escalation, leaving Marie frustrated and increasingly insistent that others understand her position. On the day of the incident, Marie believed a motorcyclist had cut her off at a rural intersection outside the city. The perceived slight triggered her familiar pattern of pursuit, following the rider for approximately 12 miles through increasingly remote countryside. Her dashboard camera captured her voice, growing more agitated as she narrated her grievances, convinced the motorcyclist needed to be confronted about his dangerous driving. The motorcyclist, unaware of Marie's intentions, said that he simply continued toward his home along the isolated dirt road. When he turned into his property's long driveway, Marie followed without hesitation. Her dashcam recorded her parking behind his motorcycle, effectively blocking his exit route. She immediately exited her vehicle and began walking toward him, shouting in broken Spanish about his driving, mispronouncing words, and mixing English phrases in a way investigators later said likely worsened confusion and made her intent harder to interpret. The homeowner retreated toward his garage, repeatedly gesturing for Marie to leave his property. Marie ignored his warnings, continuing to advance while pointing accusingly and raising her voice. Her fragmented Spanish and failure to respond to his shouted commands appeared to be interpreted as refusal rather than misunderstanding, increasing his visible agitation. The dashboard camera captured her stepping closer despite his obvious distress and defensive posture, though the camera's fixed forward angle limited clear visibility once she moved fully out of frame. As Marie moved to within a few feet, the motorcyclist drew a legally registered handgun possessed under a valid provincial firearms authorization, again ordering her to stop. Investigators later noted that he remained positioned near the garage entrance with limited retreat options. The camera recorded Marie shouting defiantly and taking another step forward just before a single gunshot echoed across the property. She collapsed immediately beside her vehicle. The homeowner placed an emergency call shortly after the shooting, but the nearest hospital was approximately 45 minutes away. Paramedics arrived roughly 53 minutes after the shooting, finding Marie had already succumbed to her injuries. The dashboard camera provided a continuous visual and audio record of the pursuit and confrontation. Though not every movement was fully visible, the autopsy revealed a single gunshot wound to the chest, causing massive internal bleeding and lung collapse. Death occurred within minutes from blood loss and respiratory failure, with injuries determined to be rapidly fatal. Provincial authorities reviewed the dashboard footage, witness statements, and ballistic evidence and conducted a formal prosecutorial review before ruling the shooting justified self-defense under Argentine law weeks later. Marie's body was repatriated to Minnesota, where a small funeral service was held for family members. It was February 6, 2015. The evening air in Orlando, Florida hung thick with humidity, clinging to the asphalt and the rows of parked cars outside an elementary school. Patricia Mendoza sat in her silver sedan, the engine idling, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. Her face was flushed from rage after the volatile school board meeting that had just ended, where heated arguments and pointed accusations had left the room tense and silent in turns. Patricia had built her reputation as the most feared parent advocate in Orange County's school system. A former marketing executive turned full-time activist, she had dedicated the last 8 years to what she called educational accountability. She had confrontations with school administrators, teachers, and other parents she deemed inadequate. Local education officials knew her well. She had successfully lobbied for traffic pattern changes around 3 schools, always citing child safety while targeting families she personally disliked. Patricia's methods were calculated and ruthless. Her laptop contained detailed files on dozens of parents, noting everything from divorce proceedings to financial troubles. That evening's board meeting had been particularly volatile. She had publicly accused a single mother of neglecting her learning-disabled son, presenting printed screenshots of the woman's social media account posts as evidence of poor parenting. The woman had fled the meeting in tears while Patricia demanded the school investigate the family's home situation. Security eventually escorted her from the building. Patricia stormed through the school parking lot. She had successfully forced 2 families to transfer their children to different schools through similar campaigns, and this case would be her most public victory. At 7:43 in the evening, well outside active school hours, Patricia pulled out of the school parking lot while simultaneously typing a text message to one of her friends about the incident. Traffic cameras captured her sedan accelerating through the very school zone she had lobbied to expand. Her phone was later confirmed as visible in multiple frames after enhancement of nearby intersection camera footage as she approached the intersection of Colonial Drive and Semoran Boulevard. The light had been red for 8 seconds when her vehicle entered the intersection at approximately 47 miles per hour, never slowing down. Immediately, a delivery truck struck Patricia's sedan on the driver's side with devastating force, crushing the cabin and spinning the vehicle before it came to rest against a traffic signal pole. The truck driver immediately called 911 while several witnesses rushed to the wreckage, but the driver's door was completely compressed, making rescue impossible. Patricia's phone was found on the passenger floor, still displaying the half-finished text message she had been typing when she ran the red light. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes, but Patricia had already succumbed to her injuries. The medical examiner determined she died from massive chest trauma, internal bleeding, and complete spinal cord transection caused by blunt force crushing. Her dash cam footage, which survived the side impact despite partial damage, showed her looking down at her phone for the final 12 seconds before impact, completely oblivious to the red light ahead. The school district implemented new conduct policies for public meetings following Patricia's death. Her 2 teenage children were placed with relatives who later, according to court filings and family statements, revealed the toxic environment Patricia had created at home, where she had trained them to spy on classmates' families for her campaigns. It was July 11th, 2018. The morning sun cast long shadows across the glass facade of the luxury high-rise in downtown Miami as Barbara Flint stood on her 42nd floor balcony, surveying the streaked windows that had been bothering her for months. Barbara had built her reputation as the building's most notorious holdout, a retired insurance adjuster who had purchased her corner unit in 2009. She viewed any shared expense as an assault on individual property rights. Previous colleagues said that her background in claims investigation had made her naturally suspicious of contractors and service providers, leading her to challenge every building expense from elevator maintenance to landscaping. High-rise window cleaning demands specialized training and equipment to manage extreme winds and height risks. Professional crews rely on industrial harnesses, redundant safety systems, and weather monitoring. Despite repeated warnings from the building management about safety and insurance liability, Barbara dismissed them as corporate fear-mongering to justify costly service contracts. That morning, Barbara set up a self-devised safety system using second-hand climbing gear she had bought online 5 years earlier, including a harness, carabiners, and static rope stored in a humid unit without proper inspection. Despite high wind advisories for Miami, with gusts up to 35 miles per hour by midday, she was determined to finish before the building's cleaning crew arrived. Barbara planned to anchor herself to the balcony railing and lean outward with an extended squeegee, mistakenly treating the railing as a load-rated anchor. Security footage showed her testing the rope and carabiners, but she likely lacked understanding of fall forces or equipment inspection. Despite her inexperience, she proceeded confidently while preparing her cleaning supplies. Barbara stepped over the balcony railing and began cleaning the first window panel. The building's security cameras captured her preparation and movements from angles covering the balcony and immediate exterior. though much of her lateral motion across the building was only partially visible as she worked her way across the building's exterior. Her movements became tentatively more confident with each window, though unsteady compared with a trained professional. The wind had been steadily increasing throughout the morning, creating additional stress on her improvised anchor system that she failed to recognize or account for. As Barbara leaned outward to reach a particularly stubborn streak on the glass, the primary carabiner connecting her harness to the anchor rope failed catastrophically due to corrosion and improper cross-loading under the combined forces of her body weight and the wind load. Barbara plummeted immediately, her body striking 3 lower balconies before impacting the concrete courtyard after approximately 5 seconds of fall time over 400 feet below. Multiple residents witnessed the fall and immediately called emergency services. The first responders arrived within 8 minutes, but Barbara's injuries were incompatible with life. The building's security director had watched the entire incident unfold on the monitoring system and provided detailed footage to investigators, but wasn't released publicly. The courtyard area was immediately cordoned off as emergency crews worked to secure the scene. The medical examiner determined that Barbara died from massive blunt force trauma, including multiple skull fractures, complete spinal cord transection, and catastrophic internal organ damage. The impact had been instantaneous and unsurvivable. The building's management company implemented mandatory safety compliance inspections following Barbara's death, prohibiting residents from performing exterior maintenance work. Her estate was subsequently billed for 3 years of unpaid maintenance fees, which were deducted from the proceeds of her unit sale to cover the building's legal and cleanup costs. It was May 29th, 2013. The afternoon heat in Scottsdale, Arizona, shimmered off Spanish tile rooftops as Donna Kruger stood in her backyard, squinting at the cloudless sky. At 45, she had spent the last 3 months waging what neighbors described as an increasingly erratic campaign against delivery drones, convinced they were violating her property rights and spying on her daily routines. Donna had inherited her grandfather's 12-gauge shotgun after his death the previous winter, but possessed no formal firearms training beyond loading shells. A former insurance adjuster who had been laid off 2 years earlier, she spent her days monitoring online forums about property rights and airspace laws, becoming convinced that commercial drones represented a personal invasion. Her social media posts showed an escalating obsession with defending her territory, often photographing aircraft overhead and researching legal precedents about airspace ownership. Modern delivery drones operate at altitudes between 200 to 400 feet, well within federal airspace regulations, and in 2013 were primarily limited to small test programs and survey flights rather than widespread consumer delivery. Donna had filed multiple complaints with local authorities about drone activity over her neighborhood, claiming the aircraft were conducting surveillance and violating her privacy rights. That Tuesday morning, Donna had received another dismissive response from the authorities regarding her complaints about unauthorized drone flights. Neighbors reported hearing her shouting about taking matters into her own hands while pacing in her backyard. Around 2 in the afternoon, a test survey drone, operating as part of a limited pilot program, approached her neighborhood, following its programmed route to a nearby address. Donna grabbed her grandfather's shotgun and climbed onto her single-story home's Spanish tile roof, despite having no experience with either firearms or roof navigation. The tiles, heated to over 140 degrees by the desert sun, made footing treacherous as she positioned herself near the roof's edge. Witnesses from neighboring properties watched as Donna raised the heavy shotgun toward the approaching drone, which was flying approximately 250 feet overhead. She had loaded the weapon with standard birdshot, completely inadequate for the distance and target. When she fired, the unexpected recoil caused her to lose footing on the superheated tiles. She tumbled backward, sliding down the steeply pitched roof, before falling approximately 20 feet into her landscaped garden below. Her body struck a decorative boulder arrangement, causing massive blunt force trauma to her head and torso. The shotgun fell separately and discharged upon impact due to inertia, causing the firing pin to strike, sending the second round harmlessly into the air. The combination of steep slope, heat, and heavy recoil made the slide unavoidable. A neighbor immediately called 911 after witnessing the fall. Paramedics arrived under 10 minutes, finding Donna conscious but bleeding heavily from multiple head wounds. Despite their efforts to stabilize her condition, she succumbed to severe brain trauma and internal bleeding during transport to the hospital. The medical examiner determined that Donna died from massive blunt force trauma to the head and chest, with contributing factors including heat stress, dehydration, and blood loss. She had remained conscious for approximately 6 minutes after the fall, before losing consciousness permanently. Her estate was settled quietly, with the property sold after extensive cleanup and removal of the blood-stained landscaping where she had fallen. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here